The storm raged through Winter Haven, tearing at rooftops and leaving the streets buried under a thick blanket of snow. Ethan Parker tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his truck struggling against the icy road as he made his way home after a long shift at the lumberyard. The truck's headlights barely pierced the swirling snow. Ethan leaned forward, trying to spot the turn to Maple Street when something caught his eye. A small shape huddled under the dim glow of a street lamp. His heart tightened as he slowed the truck, pulling over to the side of the road. He stepped out, the biting wind cutting through his coat as he approached the trembling figure. The small dog was barely visible against the snow, its matted fur coated in ice. Its eyes, wide with fear, met Ethan's, and it let out a soft whimper.
Hey there, buddy, what are you doing out in this?
The dog flinched as Ethan crouched down, his voice gentle. He shrugged off his coat, wrapping it around the shivering animal.
Let's get you somewhere warm.
The dog didn't resist as Ethan scooped it up, holding it close as he trudged back to the truck. Ethan entered his small home, the warmth of the fire greeting him as he shut the door against the storm. He placed the dog on a pile of blankets by the fireplace, its trembling slowly subsiding. Lila, his 10-year-old daughter, appeared at the top of the stairs, rubbing her eyes.
Dad? What's going on?
Ethan motioned for her to come down.
I found him outside. Poor guy was freezing.
Lila's eyes widened as she saw the dog. She knelt beside it, her small hands stroking its damp fur.
Can we keep him, Dad? Just until we find out where he belongs?
Ethan hesitated, his gaze shifting to the framed photo of Lila and her late mother on the mantel.
All right, but we'll take him to the vet tomorrow. Maybe he has a chip.
The next morning, Ethan and Lila arrived at Drive, Harper's veterinary clinic. The waiting room was filled with the hum of conversation and the occasional bark or meow. Drive, Harper greeted them with a warm smile.
And who's this little one?
His name's Buddy. We found him during the storm.
Drive, Harper ran a gentle hand along the dog's back, then scanned him for a microchip.
No chip, I'm afraid. He's severely underweight and his paws have frostbite. But with care, he'll recover.
Ethan nodded, his face thoughtful.
Thank you, doctor. We'll take care of him.
Back at the Parker home, Buddy slowly adjusted to his new surroundings. Initially timid, he stayed close to Lila, his eyes constantly darting around the room as though expecting something to happen. The soft hum of the heater filled the quiet house as Lila knelt beside Buddy, offering him a small piece of cooked chicken. He sniffed it hesitantly before taking it delicately from her hand.
Good boy, Buddy. You're safe now.
Buddy wagged his tail faintly, the first sign of trust since his arrival. Ethan watched from the doorway, his heart warming at the sight.
Looks like someone's making himself at home.
He deserves it, Dad. He's been through so much.
Ethan nodded, though his mind lingered on the flyers they still needed to print. The next day, Ethan and Lila worked together to create a stack of flyers featuring Buddy's photo, and the message found dog near Maple Street. Call if you recognize him. They spent hours walking through Winter Haven, tacking the flyers onto notice boards and handing them to shopkeepers. At the local general store, the shopkeeper took a flyer, studying it closely.
That's a fine-looking dog. I hope someone claims him.
Me too, but if not, he's already found a good home with us.
Lila smiled, her grip on Buddy's leash tightening slightly. One snowy evening, as the family sat by the fireplace, the warmth of the crackling flames wrapped around them. Buddy lay curled at Lila's feet, his eyes half closed in contentment.
Dad, do you think Mom would have liked Buddy?
Ethan's heart tightened, but he smiled softly.
She would have loved him, just like she loved you.
Buddy let out a soft sigh, his tail wagging faintly as the fire crackled. The first snowfall after the storm was thick and powdery, perfect for playing outside. Lila bundled up in her warmest coat, her cheeks flushed with excitement as she tugged on Ethan's sleeve.
Dad, let's take Buddy outside. I think he'll love it.
Ethan chuckled, pulling on his gloves.
All right, but you're the one drying him off if he gets soaked.
The moment they opened the door, Buddy bounded out into the snow, his tail wagging furiously. For a moment, his hesitance vanished, replaced by sheer joy as he leapt through the snowdrifts. The Parker yard transformed into a winter wonderland. Snow-covered trees stood like silent sentinels, and the air was filled with Buddy's excited barks and Lila's laughter. Lila crouched down, gathering a handful of snow. She threw it gently toward Buddy, who barked and lunged, scattering snow everywhere.
Buddy, you're supposed to catch it, not destroy it.
Ethan watched from the porch, a soft smile on his face. It had been a long time since their home had felt this alive. The flyers they had posted around Winter Haven began to gain attention. A neighbor knocked on their door one evening, holding one of the flyers.
I don't know if it's much help, but I think I've seen a dog like this before. There was a family passing through a couple of months ago, with one just like him.
Ethan furrowed his brow, glancing at Lila, who was holding Buddy's leash.
Do you remember anything else? Maybe where they were heading?
The neighbors shook their head, apologizing before leaving. While the information was vague, it gave Ethan a small thread of hope. That night, as Lila sat by the fire, she looked up at her father.
Dad, what if we never find his family?
Ethan crouched beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder.
Then he stays here with us, no matter what. He's part of this family now.
Buddy's confidence grew with each passing day. He no longer hesitated when exploring the house, and he greeted Lila with an enthusiastic wag of his tail every time she came home from school. Ethan began to notice how much Buddy had changed. Not just their home, but their hearts. The once quiet house was now filled with laughter, warmth, and a sense of togetherness that had been missing for years. Ethan found himself smiling more often, whether it was watching Lila and Buddy play in the yard, or hearing her chatter excitedly about the tricks she was teaching him. Days after the storm, life in the Parker household had settled into a new rhythm. Buddy had become a constant presence, his tail wagging enthusiastically whenever Lila came home from school. Yet, in the back of Ethan's mind, questions lingered. Who had Buddy belonged to? Where had he come from? Ethan sat at the kitchen table one evening, flipping through the local newspaper. Beside him, Lila was cutting out more flyers to hand out around town.
Dad, do you think someone's looking for Buddy?
Ethan glanced at her, his expression thoughtful.
I hope so, but it's strange, no calls, no signs. You'd think someone would have noticed the flyers by now.
Lila paused, her scissors hovering midair.
What if no one's looking for him? What if they don't want him anymore?
The thought hung heavy in the air. Ethan reached out, ruffling her hair gently.
Let's not jump to conclusions. We'll keep trying.
Ethan and Lila spent the weekend revisiting local businesses to check on the flyers. At the bakery, Mrs. Thompson, a cheerful woman in her 60s, greeted them with a warm smile.
Oh, that dog of yours is adorable. I saw the flyer. Any luck finding his owner?
Ethan shook his head.
Not yet. We're hoping someone comes forward soon.
Mrs. Thompson tapped her chin thoughtfully.
Well, there was a man passing through town a couple of months ago with a dog that looked similar. He stopped in for coffee. Said he was heading north to Maple Ridge.
Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly, his mind racing.
Did he mention anything else? Maybe why he was traveling?
Not much. He seemed in a hurry. But the dog was friendly, looked like it had been well cared for.
Lila tugged on Ethan's sleeve, her voice soft.
Do you think it could be Buddy? Maybe we should go to Maple Ridge.
Returning home, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the answer lay somewhere in Maple Ridge. The following day, he decided to speak with their neighbor, Mr. Grayson, who was known for his extensive travels and connections in the area. Mr. Grayson was an older man with a weathered face and a sharp mind. His home, filled with maps and old photos, was a testament to his adventurous spirit. Ethan explained the situation, showing him one of the flyers. Mr. Grayson studied it intently before nodding.
I've been to Maple Ridge plenty of times. It's a small town, not much happens there. But if someone passed through with a dog like this, the folks at the general store would know. They know everyone's business.
Ethan thanked him, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Back at home, Ethan shared what they had learned with Lila. As he spoke, Buddy perked up, his ears twitching as if recognizing the name Maple Ridge. "Dad, did you see that? He knows something." Ethan frowned slightly, watching Buddy carefully.
It could just be a coincidence, Leela, but maybe we're onto something.
Buddy trotted over to Lila, pressing his nose against her hand. She knelt down, hugging him tightly.
Don't worry, Buddy, we'll figure it out. You're safe with us.
Ethan couldn't help but smile at the sight, though a part of him wondered what Buddy's reaction truly meant. The next day, Ethan and Lila visited the library to look up more information about Maple Ridge. Mrs. Hensley, the librarian, greeted them warmly.
Maple Ridge? Now there's a quiet place. My sister lives there. What are you looking for?
Ethan hesitated, unsure how much to reveal.
We're trying to trace where this dog might have come from. Someone mentioned seeing a man with a similar dog passing through.
Mrs. Hensley's eyes lit up with recognition.
Oh, I remember now. My sister told me about a traveler who stayed at their inn briefly. He had a dog with him, she said. Maybe she knows more.
Ethan took down the contact information gratefully. That evening, as the snow fell gently outside, Lila played with Buddy in the living room. She had tied a piece of string to an old sock, waving it in the air as Buddy leapt and pounced with enthusiasm. The crackling fire cast a warm glow over the room, and for the first time in a long while, the Parker household felt truly alive. Ethan watched from his armchair, a faint smile on his lips.
You two are inseparable now.
He's my best friend, Dad, and I think he feels the same way.
Buddy barked as if in agreement, his tail wagging furiously. The next morning, Ethan packed a small bag and loaded it into the truck.
Are we really going to Maple Ridge? All of us.
Ethan nodded.
It's the only lead we have, and if Buddy belongs there, we owe it to him to find out.
As they drove out of Winter Haven, Lila sat in the back seat with Buddy curled up beside her. She stroked his fur, her voice soft.
No matter what happens, you'll always be part of our family.
2 days after their visit to the library, the Parker family received an unexpected visitor. A young woman, bundled tightly in a winter coat, knocked on their door, a hesitant smile on her face. Snowflakes clung to her hair, and her cheeks were flushed from the cold. She held one of the flyers in her gloved hand.
Hi, I'm sorry to bother you, but I saw this flyer at the general store. I think I might recognize this dog.
Ethan opened the door wider, motioning for her to come inside.
Come in, please. You're freezing out there.
She stepped inside, her boots leaving small puddles on the entryway floor. Lila peeked out from the living room, Buddy at her side. The dog's ears perked up as he saw the stranger.
I'm not sure, but a few months ago, I saw a man with a dog that looked a lot like him. It was at a gas station near Maple Ridge. He seemed to be traveling alone.
Ethan exchanged a glance with Lila.
Do you remember anything else? Like his name or where he was going?
The woman shook her head apologetically.
No, I'm sorry, but the dog looked happy. He wasn't stray back then, that's for sure.
She handed the flyer back to Ethan, offering a polite smile before leaving. After the woman's visit, Ethan and Lila decided to redouble their efforts. They visited more stores and even knocked on a few doors, asking neighbors if they recognized Buddy. One elderly couple, the Thompsons, recalled something interesting.
We remember seeing a dog like him at the farmer's market last fall. He was with a man who looked like he'd been traveling for a while. They bought supplies and left quickly.
Ethan jotted down the details, feeling a growing sense of urgency.
Thank you. Every little bit helps.
Back at home, Buddy seemed more at ease than ever. He followed Lila everywhere, his tail wagging whenever she spoke. Even Ethan noticed the changes. Buddy no longer hesitated when moving around the house. He had claimed a favorite spot near the fireplace, curling up contentedly whenever the family gathered in the living room. One evening, as Ethan sat at the kitchen table, going through the day's notes, Lila approached him with a question.
Dad, do you think Buddy remembers his old owner?
Ethan paused, his pen hovering above the notepad.
Maybe. Dogs have a good memory, but I think he's happy here with us, too.
Lila nodded, glancing toward Buddy, who was snoring softly by the fire. Ethan decided it was time to take a more direct approach. He began planning a trip to Maple Ridge, feeling that it was the most likely place to find answers.
Leela, pack your things. We're heading to Maple Ridge tomorrow.
Lila's face lit up.
Really? Buddy's coming too, right?
Ethan chuckled, nodding.
Of course. He's the reason we're going.
They loaded the truck the next morning. Blankets and snacks for the journey packed neatly in the backseat. Buddy hopped into the truck eagerly, his tail wagging as if sensing the adventure ahead. The drive to Maple Ridge was long, the snowy roads winding through the mountains. Along the way, they stopped at a small diner for lunch. The waitress, a friendly woman with a warm smile, noticed Buddy immediately.
Well, aren't you a handsome boy? Is he yours?
Ethan hesitated before explaining the situation. The waitress listened intently, nodding.
You might want to check with the Maple Ridge Inn. Travelers often stay there. If someone was passing through with a dog, they'd know.
Ethan thanked her, jotting down the suggestion. The morning sun rose weakly over Winter Haven, its pale rays struggling to pierce through the thick blanket of clouds. The Parker family prepared for their journey, the truck loaded with supplies. Ethan tightened the straps on a small box in the truck bed, glancing at the sky. The air was crisp, and the faint sound of snow crunching underfoot added to the stillness of the morning. Lila emerged from the house, bundled in her thickest coat, with Buddy trotting behind her.
We're ready, Dad. Buddy's already excited.
Ethan smiled, opening the truck's back door.
All right, let's get moving. We've got a long drive ahead.
Buddy leapt into the back seat, wagging his tail as Lila climbed in beside him. The journey started smoothly, the winding roads, offering picturesque views of snow-covered trees and frozen lakes. Lila pressed her face against the window, marveling at the icy landscape.
Everything looks like it's out of a fairy tale.
Ethan chuckled, his hand steady on the wheel.
Let's hope the fairy tale doesn't turn into a survival story. This snow's getting heavier.
As they climbed higher into the mountains, the weather turned. Flurries of snow quickly became a full-blown storm, the wind howling around the truck. Visibility dropped to mere feet, and the tires struggled for traction on the icy road. Buddy let out a low whine from the back seat, pressing closer to Lila.
It's okay, Buddy. We're safe.
Ethan's jaw tightened as he focused on the road.
We'll have to stop soon. This storm isn't letting up.
Ethan spotted a small roadside diner through the blinding snow, and quickly pulled into the parking lot. Inside, the warmth was a welcome relief. The few patrons inside looked up as the Parker family entered, brushing snow off their coats. A waitress approached them with a friendly smile.
Rough weather out there, huh? You folks traveling far?
Ethan nodded, his hands cupped around a steaming mug of coffee.
Heading to Maple Ridge. Thought we'd stop until the storm eases up.
The waitress's eyes widened slightly.
Maple Ridge? That's quite a drive in this weather. You sure you'll make it today?
Lila piped up, her voice bright despite the storm outside.
We're looking for Buddy's old owner. We think they might be from there.
As the storm outside raged on, the bell above the diner's door jingled, signaling another arrival. A middle-aged man stomped snow off his boots, his coat dusted white. He glanced around before settling at the counter. Buddy's ears perked up immediately, and he let out a soft bark. Lila turned to Ethan, her eyes wide.
Dad, look at Buddy. Do you think he knows that man?
Ethan frowned, watching as Buddy's tail began to wag. The dog seemed more alert than he'd been the entire trip. The waitress approached the man, taking his order, and exchanged a few words. Ethan leaned closer to Lila, whispering.
Let's not jump to conclusions. It could be nothing.
Unable to resist, Lila stood, and approached the man with Buddy trailing behind her. Ethan followed quickly, not wanting her to disturb the stranger.
Excuse me, sir. Do you know this dog?
The man looked down at Buddy, his brow furrowing in thought.
He does look familiar. Where'd you find him?
Lila glanced back at Ethan, who stepped forward to explain.
We found him in Winter Haven after the storm. We're heading to Maple Ridge to see if we can find his owner.
The man scratched his chin thoughtfully.
Maple Ridge? I remember seeing a guy with a dog like this at the general store. There a couple of months ago. Might be worth checking out.
Ethan nodded, thanking him for the information. The storm finally began to ease as the Parker family got back on the road. Ethan gripped the wheel tightly, his eyes scanning the now slightly clearer path ahead. The sun peeked weakly through the clouds, casting long shadows over the snowy terrain. Buddy lay curled in the back seat, his head resting on Lila's lap as she stroked his fur.
Dad, do you think we'll really find Buddy's owner?
Ethan glanced at her through the rearview mirror, his expression thoughtful.
I don't know, but at least we're trying. That's what matters.
As they drove further into the mountains, the roads became narrower and more treacherous. At one point, they came across a fallen tree blocking the road. Ethan pulled the truck to a stop, sighing.
Looks like we'll have to clear this ourselves.
Lila opened her door, the cold air biting at her cheeks, as she followed her father. Together, they worked to move the smaller branches, while Buddy barked encouragement from the truck. After hours of driving and clearing obstacles, the Parker family decided to stop for the night at a small roadside inn. The building was quaint, with its wooden facade, and a flickering neon vacancy sign. Inside, the warmth from a crackling fireplace greeted them, along with a friendly innkeeper. Cold night to be traveling. Room for 3? Ethan smiled, glancing at Lila and Buddy.
3, yes. And do you allow dogs?
The innkeeper chuckled. As long as he's well behaved. Buddy wagged his tail as if in agreement. In their room, Lila sat on the bed, brushing snowflakes out of Buddy's fur.
Dad, do you think we're getting closer? Everyone we talk to seems to know a little more about Buddy's past.
Ethan nodded, sitting down beside her.
I think so. Maple Ridge might just have the answers we're looking for.
Buddy let out a soft whine, resting his head on Lila's lap. The room was quiet, save for the gentle crackling of the fireplace. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in a serene white. The next morning, the Parker family resumed their journey, the roads now clear, but the air still biting cold. By mid-afternoon, the truck rolled into Maple Ridge. The town was small and picturesque, its snow-covered rooftops and warmly lit windows, creating a postcard-perfect scene. People bustled around the main square, bundled in coats and scarves, while children built snowmen near the town's Christmas tree. Ethan parked the truck near the general store, the place mentioned by the diner waitress.
All right, this is where we start. Let's see if anyone recognizes Buddy.
As they stepped out, Buddy sniffed the air, his tail wagging slightly. Lila tightened her grip on his leash, a mix of excitement and nervousness in her expression. Inside the store, the bell above the door jingled, drawing the attention of the elderly shopkeeper.
Afternoon. What can I do for you?
Ethan held up one of the flyers, explaining their situation.
We're looking for the owner of this dog. We heard they might have passed through here a few months ago.
The shopkeeper squinted at the flyer, his brow furrowing.
Ah, yes, I remember. A man came through with a dog like this, bought supplies and mentioned he was heading to the north side of town. Didn't stay long though.
Lila's eyes lit up, and she glanced at Ethan.
Dad, that has to be Buddy's owner. We're so close.
Ethan thanked the shopkeeper and turned back to Lila.
Let's follow up, but remember, this might not be the ending we're hoping for.
As they drove toward the northern part of Maple Ridge, the anticipation in the truck was palpable. Buddy sat upright, his ears perked, as though he, too, sensed something significant was about to happen. Lila reached out to pet him, her voice soft.
No matter what, Buddy, you're part of our family now, right, Dad?
Ethan nodded, his eyes on the road ahead.
That's right. Whatever happens, he has a home with us.
The northern outskirts of Maple Ridge were quiet and sparsely populated. The Parker family followed the directions given by the shopkeeper, the truck, crunching over snow-covered roads. Buddy sat alert in the back seat, his eyes fixed on the passing scenery. Lila leaned forward, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and nervousness.
Dad, do you think he'll recognize the place? What if it's not the right house?
Ethan glanced at her through the rearview mirror, offering a reassuring smile.
Let's not worry about that yet, we'll find out soon enough.
They approached a modest cabin nestled among the trees. Smoke curled from the chimney, and a doghouse sat empty near the porch. The house, though small, exuded warmth. Wind chimes tinkled softly in the cold breeze, and a well-worn path led to the door. Ethan parked the truck, and as they stepped out, Buddy began to pull on his leash, his tail wagging furiously.
Dad, look. He remembers this place.
Before Ethan could knock, the door opened to reveal a young man in his late 20s. His expression shifted from curiosity to disbelief as he saw Buddy.
Buddy, is that really you?
Buddy barked excitedly, pulling free from Lila's grasp, and bounding toward the man. The young man dropped to his knees, wrapping his arms around the dog as tears filled his eyes. The reunion was a flurry of wagging tails, joyful barks, and emotional embraces. The man buried his face in Buddy's fur, his voice breaking.
I thought I'd lost you forever.
Lila watched with a mixture of happiness and sadness.
Dad, he really is Buddy's owner.
Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, nodding.
Looks like we found where he belongs.
The man, who introduced himself as Jimmy, invited them inside. The warmth of the cabin enveloped them, and he motioned for them to sit by the fire. Over mugs of hot cocoa, Jimmy explained how he had lost Buddy during a road trip months ago.
We were traveling to visit family up north when he slipped out of his leash during a stop. I searched everywhere, but I couldn't find him. It broke my heart to leave.
Lila frowned, her hands wrapped tightly around her mug.
But you never gave up on him, did you?
Jimmy shook his head, a faint smile on his lips.
Never. I just didn't know where else to look. I'm so grateful you found him.
As the evening wore on, Lila found herself growing quieter. While Jimmy and Ethan spoke about logistics show Buddy would transition back to his old home, Lila stared into the flickering flames of the fireplace, her thoughts racing. Buddy had become her best friend, her constant companion in the weeks since they'd found him. The thought of saying goodbye left a hollow ache in her chest. Jimmy noticed her silence and leaned forward, his voice soft.
Hey, Lila, I can see how much you love Buddy. And it's clear he loves you, too.
Lila looked up, blinking back tears.
I want him to be happy, but it's hard to let him go.
Jimmy nodded, glancing at Buddy, who was sprawled contentedly at Lila's feet.
I get it. Buddy's special. He's brought so much light back into my life, just like he's done for you.
Ethan chimed in, his voice steady.
What matters most is what's best for Buddy, and it seems like he's lucky to have both of you in his life.
Jimmy sat back in his chair, deep in thought. After a long pause, he spoke, his tone resolute.
What if Buddy doesn't have to choose? I mean, he's already a part of your family. Maybe we can share him.
Lila's eyes widened in surprise.
You mean like co-parents?
Jimmy laughed, nodding.
Exactly. I can visit Winter Haven, and you're always welcome here. Buddy can have 2 homes, just like he has 2 families now.
Ethan looked thoughtful, then smiled.
It's unconventional, but it might just work.
That night, the Parker family decided to stay at Jimmy's cabin. Lila insisted on sleeping by the fireplace with Buddy, who curled up beside her, his warm fur a comforting presence. The cabin was quiet except for the occasional crackle of the fire. Snow continued to fall gently outside, muffling the sounds of the forest. Lila whispered softly to Buddy, stroking his fur as he dozed.
You're so lucky, Buddy. You have 2 people who love you so much, but I'll miss you when you're not with us.
Buddy let out a contented sigh, his tail wagging faintly in his sleep. Lila smiled, her heart aching but full of gratitude for the time they'd shared. The next morning, as the Parker family prepared to leave, the atmosphere was bittersweet. Jimmy stood by the truck, Buddy sitting faithfully at his side. Lila hugged Buddy tightly, her voice trembling.
Be good for Jimmy, okay, eh? And don't forget us.
Jimmy placed a hand on her shoulder, offering a reassuring smile.
You'll see him again soon, I promise. And maybe I'll bring him to Winter Haven for Christmas.
Ethan shook Jimmy's hand firmly.
Thank you for understanding and for letting us be part of Buddy's life.
Jimmy nodded.
Thank you for bringing him back. You've given me a gift I'll never forget.
As the truck pulled away, Buddy barked once, as if to say goodbye. Lila watched him through the rearview mirror, a tear sliding down her cheek. The snowy road stretched out before them, but in her heart, Lila knew this wasn't the end. It was a new beginning, not just for Buddy, but for two families brought together by one incredible dog. A week after returning to Winter Haven, Lila received an unexpected surprise letter from Jimmy. It arrived with a photo of Buddy, sitting proudly in front of a decorated Christmas tree. The handwriting was neat but slightly rushed, as though Jimmy had written it in a moment of excitement. Lila read the letter aloud at the kitchen table, her voice full of joy.
Dear Lila and Ethan, Buddy's doing great, but he misses you both. I've been thinking about what you said, and I want to invite you to spend Christmas here with us. Let's make this a holiday Buddy will never forget.
Ethan chuckled, leaning back in his chair.
Looks like we're heading back to Maple Ridge for Christmas.
Lila beamed, holding the photo close to her chest.
I can't wait to see Buddy again.
On Christmas morning, the Parker family arrived at Jimmy's cabin, the scent of pine and fresh snow filling the air. Buddy bounded out to greet them, his tail wagging furiously. The day was spent exchanging stories, decorating the tree, and sharing a holiday feast. Lila and Jimmy even built a snowman together, Buddy barking happily, as he darted around them. As the sun set and the stars emerged, Ethan raised a glass of cider, his voice steady and warm.
To Buddy, who reminded us all what it means to be a family.
The snow had stopped falling, leaving the world wrapped in a quiet, pristine blanket of white. Inside Jimmy's cabin, the atmosphere was warm and bustling. The Parker family had arrived the previous evening, and now the group worked together to prepare for Christmas. Lila and Jimmy decorated the tree, their laughter ringing through the cozy space as Buddy circled around them, wagging his tail. The tree sparkled with golden lights and colorful ornaments, each one reflecting the flickering glow of the fireplace. Ethan, standing by the window, watched the scene with a soft smile.
Feels like this is where we're meant to be this Christmas.
Jimmy, hanging a star at the top of the tree, nodded in agreement.
Buddy brought us together. It's only fitting we celebrate with him.
As the evening wore on, Jimmy pulled Ethan aside, a twinkle in his eye.
I've got an idea to make tonight extra special. Think Lila's up for a little surprise?
Ethan raised an eyebrow, intrigued.
Knowing her, she'll love it. What's the plan?
Jimmy motioned toward a sled propped against the wall.
Buddy used to love pulling this. Let's take it out for a moonlit ride.
Bundled in warm coats and scarves, the group stepped outside into the stillness of the snowy night. The moon hung high above, casting a silver glow over the landscape. Jimmy secured the sled, while Buddy barked excitedly, his tail wagging furiously.
Buddy looks like he's been waiting for this all night.
Jimmy grinned, patting Buddy on the head.
He's got the spirit, that's for sure. Ready, boy?
With the sled attached to a harness, Buddy took his position confidently. Lila climbed aboard, her cheeks flushed with excitement.
Hold on tight, Lila. Buddy's got some speed.
As Jimmy gave a soft command, Buddy took off, the sled, gliding effortlessly over the snow. Lila's laughter echoed through the crisp air, blending with Buddy's joyful barks. The snowy field sparkled under the moonlight, and the sound of the sled slicing through the snow was the only noise in the serene night. After a few exhilarating runs, the group gathered by a small fire Jimmy had prepared earlier. The crackling flames provided warmth against the cold, and Buddy lay beside Lila, his head resting on her lap.
This is the best Christmas ever, don't you think, Buddy?
Buddy let out a contented sigh, his tail wagging faintly. Jimmy passed around mugs of hot cocoa, his voice thoughtful.
You know, when I lost Buddy, I thought I'd lost a part of myself. But seeing him with you two, it's like he was meant to bring us all together.
Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on the flickering fire.
Life has a funny way of giving us what we need, even if we don't see it at first.
As the fire crackled and the night deepened, a gentle snowfall began, blanketing the world in a fresh layer of white. Lila looked up at the sky, her voice soft.
It's so quiet, it feels like everything is at peace tonight.
Jimmy smiled, his eyes reflecting the firelight.
Buddy has a way of making things feel right. He's more than just a dog, he's a piece of everyone's heart.
Ethan placed a hand on Lila's shoulder, his voice steady.
He's brought us together in a way I never expected, and I'm grateful for that.
Buddy seemed to sense the significance of the moment. He sat up, his ears perked, and let out a soft bark, as if agreeing with everything that had been said. The next morning, the cabin was filled with the scent of pine and fresh baked pastries. Lila rushed downstairs, her heart pounding with excitement. Under the tree, Buddy was already sitting, a bright red bow tied around his neck. Jimmy handed Lila a small box, his smile warm.
Open this, it's from Buddy and me.
Inside was a leather collar, engraved with the words "Forever loved by two families." Lila's eyes filled with tears as she threw her arms around Jimmy.
Thank you, this means everything to me.
Ethan watched the scene, his heart full.
Looks like Buddy's given us the best gift of all family.
As the day unfolded, the group made plans for the future. Jimmy and Ethan discussed visits, ensuring Buddy would remain a shared part of their lives. Lila, sitting with Buddy by the fire, whispered softly,
No matter where you are, Buddy, you'll always have a home with us.
Buddy nuzzled her hand, his tail wagging. As the Christmas evening drew to a close, the group gathered around the fireplace one last time. Ethan brought out a photo album he had packed in the truck, flipping through pages filled with memories of Lila and Buddy's adventures. The glow of the fire cast soft shadows on their faces. As they leaned in to look at the pictures, Buddy rested his head on Lila's lap, his tail thumping gently against the floor. Jimmy chuckled, pointing to one of the photos.
That's Buddy's expression, all right. Like he knows he's the king of the house.
Lila giggled, scratching Buddy behind the ears.
He is the king. And he knows it.
Ethan nodded, his expression turning reflective.
These moments, they're what life's about. Buddy brought us more than memories, he gave us connections we didn't even know we needed.
Jimmy raised his mug of cider, his voice filled with warmth.
To Buddy the dog who brought us together and made this Christmas unforgettable.
The clink of mugs echoed softly in the cozy room, sealing the sentiment. As the snow continued to fall outside, Jimmy walked the Parker family to their truck. Buddy, now wearing his new collar, trotted alongside Lila, his tail wagging furiously. Jimmy crouched down to Buddy's level, his voice low but firm.
You're a lucky boy, Buddy. You've got 2 homes and twice the love. Take care of them, all right?
Buddy barked softly, as if understanding the weight of the moment. Lila turned to Jimmy, her eyes shining.
We'll see you soon, right?
Jimmy smiled, ruffling her hair.
Count on it. Buddy and I have plans to visit Winter Haven next month.
Ethan clasped Jimmy's hand firmly.
You're always welcome. This isn't goodbye, it's just the start.
As the Parker family drove away, the cabin's lights grew smaller in the distance, but the warmth of the day lingered in their hearts. Lila gazed out of the truck window, watching the stars twinkle above the snow-covered landscape.
Dad, do you think Buddy knows how much we love him?
Ethan smiled, his hand steady on the wheel.
Of course he does. Dogs are smart like that. He knows he has 2 families now.
Buddy let out a soft bark from the back seat, as if to affirm Ethan's words. The truck moved steadily along the snowy road, its headlights carving a path through the darkness. Inside, the warmth of shared love and new beginnings glowed as brightly as the stars above. In the weeks that followed, the bond between the Parker family and Jimmy grew stronger. Buddy became the bridge between 2 homes, bringing joy and connection wherever he went. Lila often wrote letters to Jimmy, sharing updates about Buddy's antics and their plans for his next visit. Each letter strengthened the understanding that their lives were now forever intertwined. Buddy had been a stray dog, felt lost and alone in a snowstorm. But through the kindness of strangers and the strength of love, he became the heart of two families, proving that miracles often come in unexpected forms.